Okay, everyone, let's continue with part two. We're just going to call this a little history lesson. And this first part is we're going to talk about the eras of postcards. So this would probably be a short video because there's really a lot involved in this little history lesson, but I don't want to overwhelm you. So let's just get into the, well, first, you got to know what postcards collecting is. It's deltiology, and it's the hobby of collecting postcards. So that's really the only history you need to know up front, that it's called deltiology. But this is really kind of like meat and potatoes starting here. There are several eras of postcards. You can see them on the screen, and we're going to dive into them each a little bit more in depth. First is the Pioneer Era, and that ran from around 1869 to 1898. And you're going to think of this Pioneer Era mostly as postal cards. Postal cards were authorized by the United States Post Office, and other countries had them also, but they're postal cards. These are not postcards per se, they're postal cards. And this one's like the very first one uh, in I believe 1870s is when the first actual postal card came out. This one was an advertising one, 1874. So there's a whole variety of postal cards, and these postal cards actually are still being produced today. But back in for postcard history, you just need to know that postal cards really are what started it until Congress approved the actual use of the word postcard and let private citizens send printed matter that was not a letter through the mail. So after Pioneer Era comes private mailing card. These are all going to be undivided backs. They're all going to be between 1898 and 1902, and they're all going to have pretty much a view on the front, a place for the writing. On the back, it's going to say private mailing card, and there's going to be a thing up here that says authors. Pretty much that the Congress authorized people to mail this type of card, and that was in 1898. Again, they're calling it a postal card, but this is really where people start saying private mailing card and postcard pretty much synonymously. So after private mailing card era, you're going to get into the undivided back era, and that was roughly 1901 through 1907. And undivided back, there is no division in the back. You were only allowed to write on the front of these type of cards, and the back was reserved only for the address. And somewhere in 1907, I can't remember if it was in May or so, they authorized to go to a divided back where the front of the card is usually just the full image of the scene, and the back of the card is where the message moved to, so you had more of a view card. And on the back of a divided back, you can see on the left there's a place for the message, and on the right is where the address goes. So again, 1907 to 1917 is when the divided back era came around. And then after divided back era, we go to white border era, 1917 through 1929. My understanding of why they became white border, this is war era. Pre-World War I, the majority of postcards were printed in Germany. And of course, we went to war with Germany in World War I, and we didn't get any more postcards from them. So also the the manufacturing of postcards came back to the United States, and in order to save money, ink money, they pretty much added this white border the whole way around, and that is why they're called white border. It was pretty much just a cost-saving measure. I can't remember exactly how many percentage of ink they saved by chopping down the scene, but this is pretty much from 1917 to 1929, and I have seen 1915 white border cards. And that's what the back looks like. They're kind of a slick feel to them. There's no, I can't really give you the exact thing, just that they're slick. They slide very easily, as opposed to the next era, which is linen era, which is 1930-ish through 1959. There were still linen cards produced into the 60s and 70s, but generally in the postcard history eras, this is the linen era, 1930s to 1959. And this has a very rough texture to it. They call it linen. My understanding, again, because some of the rag content, linen rag, was used in the paper. True postcard collectors, they don't usually like the white border and newer cards. They like the divided back and undivided back eras. That's called the golden age of postcards. So anyway, you can see on the screen it's real thick textured, and that's usually your linen card. There's the back. And then you get into the Chrome era, 1939 to 1970s. In 1939, there were Chrome cards usually put out by, I think, like Phillips 76 gas station. You'll see those. But the majority of them are the 1950s up to 1970s. A lot of times these are confused with, people call these real photos. They are not. They are printed postcards. If you looked at these with a magnifying glass, you'd see little squiggles. We'll go over that in the future. But usually with a lot of old cars, some of my favorite cards. Then you get the, I'm sorry, this is a 1939 Phillips 76 gasoline. So that's what those earlier chromes are going to be from this gasoline giveaway. And then Continental Chrome is late 70s or sometime in the 70s up into present. Now there are Continental size, which is 4 by 6 inches from the 30s and 40s and 50s. Usually those are foreign cards, but Continental Chromes, they may come into their own. I don't sell a whole bunch of these Continental Chrome cards just because, one, they're newer, and I just don't think they've come into their own yet. 10, 15, 20 years, they might be more valuable because as these scenes, go away. Figure in 1970s, that was what, still 40, almost 50 years ago. There are some Chrome cards that I will seek out, and those are usually Hong Kong cards or amusement parks. As you can see on the screen there, some Hong Kong Continental cards have sold for well over $150. It's just, again, I think their time will come, just not quite there yet. But there are valuable Continental Chrome cards out there. So we'll go into section 3, which is how postcards are made.